My husband caused the death of my child for his illegitimate son. After we got married, Vincent cherished me deeply and everyone around envied us. When I was 8 months pregnant, he knelt on the ground, begging me to donate bone marrow to his sister's son. After I refused, the gentle and refined man turned violently angry. "Luna, there will be more children, but Ethan can't wait." He drugged me unconscious, tied me to the operating table, and forcibly delivered our unborn daughter to donate bone marrow to his sister's son. Only then did I realize that the so-called sister was nothing but his lover's son. Vincent's nephew Ethan was hospitalized, and every night he came home very late. Before going to bed, I heard the door and went to check, only to see him pale-faced. The doctor said Ethan can't hold on much longer. Yvette fainted crying 3 times tonight. It breaks my heart to see her like this. I patted his back to comfort him, but was shocked by what he said next. "If the child can't make it, then let's have a C-section. He's the only one in our family who matches Ethan. I can't just stand by and do nothing." I suddenly pulled away from his embrace, looking at him in disbelief. I couldn't believe such words could come from the mouth of a man about to become a father. Tears instantly welled up in my eyes, but my throat tightened, leaving me unable to speak. Vincent was startled by my emotional reaction and quickly stood up, trying to hold me, but I pushed him away. "Vincent, you're crazy. This is our child, a life too. I could never harm my own child. Luna, just think of this as me begging you. We can have more children in the future, but if Ethan dies, Yvette won't survive either. That's 2 lives at stake." Vincent, tears in his eyes, knelt before me, grabbing my clothes, looking at me with a pleading expression. I looked at him with a laughable sadness. Her child was life itself, so was my child just a handful of dry grass? A hand pulled his away from my body. From the moment he suggested using my child to save others, all my love for him vanished. I raised my hand and struck his face hard, my eyes full of disappointment. "Vincent, you are the father of the child. How can you be so heartless? You should let Yvette go find the man who got her pregnant. She doesn't suit that man, but surely he suits her. You know full well she is a single mother. That man left as soon as he saw Ethan. Can't you have any kindness in your heart?" Vincent frowned, his face dark with accusations, condemning me for being cruel. "I just want to protect my child. What's wrong with that? Why should my child have to make a sacrifice? That means death. If anyone dares to harm my child, I will fight to the death." I pushed him away forcefully, wanting to leave this suffocating place. Vincent looked at me with no intention of backing down, picked up the glass on the coffee table, and smashed it forcefully on the ground. "Luna, I'm not discussing this with you. Tomorrow you will go to the hospital. Ethan cannot die." Vincent must have gone mad. I didn't respond to his words and took out my phone to call the driver at home. At that moment, I felt a sharp pain at the back of my head, and then everything before my eyes plunged into darkness. When I closed my eyes, I saw the ruthless expression on Vincent's face, and it felt as if countless knives were mercilessly tormenting my heart. We have been loving and trusting since we got married. Just last night, we were even discussing whether the child would resemble him or me. But in just one day, he changed completely from before. I began to doubt whether Vincent's feelings for me were genuine. Suddenly, the image of Daniel's disappointed face before our marriage flashed through my mind. "Luna, Vincent is not someone you can trust. You can't be fooled by his appearance." At the time, I thought Daniel said this because he didn't like Vincent, but now it all seems true. I regretted it. Why was I so determined to marry him back then? If I hadn't married him, would my child have been born safely? The pain in my arm made me open my eyes. In front of me were several doctors in white coats, holding test reports and studying them. My heart instantly sank to the bottom. I never expected Vincent to really harm my child. I forcefully pushed away the nurse who was drawing my blood. I tried to turn over and get out of bed, but found that my lower body was powerless. This feeling made me utterly despair. With bloodshot eyes, I glared at the doctors. Go call Vincent, or else I won't agree to the surgery even if I die. The doctor just glanced at me and continued discussing the surgical details. Watching their behavior, I realized this was Vincent's private hospital. No matter what I said, they wouldn't offend the boss for my sake. Just then, the nurse cautiously pushed the blood collection equipment toward me. I looked at her gratefully, then picked up the scissors and pressed them against my neck, my voice hoarse with a roar. If I can't see him, I'll die right in front of you. The Daniel family and the Luna family will never let you off. Think about whether Vincent can protect you. I no longer cared whether their marriage could continue. I only wanted to save the child. 10 minutes later, Vincent finally stood before me. The love in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a dark, sinister look as he stared at me. Luna, what exactly are you making a fuss about? Wouldn't it be better to obediently have the surgery? I reached out and grabbed his clothes, my eyes full of pleading. For the sake of our relationship, please spare our child. You want the South Suburb project, right? Just send me back to my home, and I'll have Daniel give it to you. Vincent sneered as he grabbed my chin, his eyes full of contempt. Feelings? You're just a tool for me to collect money. If it weren't for you, how would the Vincent family have the capital they have now? As for the project in the southern suburbs, how could it be worth less than my son's life? Vincent's words exploded like thunder in my ears. I looked at him in disbelief. Ethan was actually his son. This was the most disgraceful kind of relationship in our circle, having a child with a foster sister. The thought that I had been deceived by them for 3 years made me feel sick. Vincent, your marrow is fine too. Have you ever donated to my child? I didn't care what kind of relationship they had. Once I got out of danger, divorce was certain. I was almost on my knees begging, yet I still couldn't bring back his conscience. Instead, another person appeared before me. Luna, you've taken my place for so long. It's time to give it back. Do you think Vincent doesn't want to donate to my son? In these 4 years, he has wished more than anyone else that he could save him. But Ethan is only 4 years old. Only someone of a similar age can absorb it better. If he weren't worried that I couldn't bear the loss of another child, do you think you could stand by his side? Yvette's words struck me like a thunderbolt, turning my 3 years of effort into a joke. I thought Vincent loved me, which was why he pursued me and cared for me. I never expected it to be such a scheme. No wonder when I wanted to have a child in a couple of years, Vincent held me with a look of grievance, wanting a fruit of our love. He even secretly replaced my birth control pills with vitamins. When faced with my anger, he rented out the entire amusement park to cheer me up. At that moment, I realized that no matter what I said, I couldn't escape the clutches of this fate. I hated myself even more for leaving a precious jade behind and choosing such a broken stone instead. Before meeting Vincent, I had a crush on Daniel, worried that confessing would ruin even our friendship. After Vincent appeared, he was like a warm man. Whenever I had a need, he was always the first to show up. I couldn't tell if my feelings for Daniel were dependence or love. When I wanted to ask him in person, he went abroad for an inspection, and during that time, I completely fell. It wasn't until our engagement that Daniel appeared before me with red, teary eyes. I only realized then that I wasn't the only one with a secret crush back then. It was just that neither of us dared to take a step forward, and we missed each other. Daniel, so as not to disturb my marriage, only appears when I need him. At other times, he goes abroad to develop his career. Now, all I can do is silently pray in my heart that the nurse can get through to Daniel's private number. Just now, seeing me so agitated, the doctors had no choice but to temporarily give up on the idea of surgery. Seeing that they seemed relaxed, I immediately sent them all out and asked the nurse to stay. You help me call Daniel. From now on, you will have the protection of both the Daniel family and my family. As a result, the nurse only asked for money to help my mother have the surgery, and after hearing that, I agreed. Perhaps the nurse has already notified Daniel, but I don't know if he is in the country. All I can do now is buy time. Vincent, You are such an ungrateful wretch. My family helped you rise to high society and gave you resources. As long as my child and I are safe this time, I can ensure that the family will cooperate with you for the entire next year." Vincent sneered and pulled Yvette into his arms, his eyes full of tenderness. When he looked at me, his gaze was fierce and his words were filled with hatred. "I've had enough of pretending to be submissive in front of you these past few years. The chances of an accident happening to a pregnant woman are high, and you don't want to die, right? So you'd better cooperate properly." As soon as Vincent finished speaking, he carried Yvette away. Watching their departing figures, my heart sank into an icy abyss, unable to save itself. Fear overwhelmed me, and I tried desperately to escape, rolling off the bed with all my strength, but I ended up landing on my stomach. The piercing scream completely drew the few people outside the room inside. "What are you dazing for? Come and help." Just when I thought he might regret it, he grabbed my neck tightly. "Luna, if you want to die, I'll let you after the child is born. Don't think you can get away with this." Yvette slapped me fiercely across the face. "Bitch, if you think my son will die, you're dreaming." Their voices grew increasingly faint, and the doctor's words about severe bleeding plunged me into despair. The pain drained the color from my face, and the figures before me became blurry and indistinct. Just when I thought I was going to die here today, the shackles on me vanished. Fresh air rushed into my nostrils, but it was far from enough. I opened my mouth, breathing heavily, tears slowly falling from the corners of my eyes. Then Daniel appeared before me, sweat covering his forehead, his face full of worry as he gently touched my cheek. "Don't let them touch my child, please." I tightly grasped Daniel's hand, desperate to hear that he would protect my baby. Daniel wiped the tears from the corner of my eye. He had brought his medical team with him and would take me away from here if necessary. The unease in my heart vanished, and my eyelids grew heavier and heavier. "Luna, hold on, don't fall asleep." His anxious voice became hollow in my ears, and darkness engulfed my vision. In my dream, a little girl came over, holding my hand, looking at me with reluctance. "Mom, is it because the baby was naughty that they want to hurt the baby?" Her voice was choked with sobs, her eyes red and swollen, and she looked like a broken doll. Her wronged expression stabbed sharply at my heart. "My baby is very good, the most beloved treasure of Mom." Since I got pregnant, other expectant mothers kept talking about how uncomfortable they were. But I only had a slightly bigger belly, with no discomfort at all, and my figure was still the same as before pregnancy. All the checkups were clear, leaving me without a trace of worry. How could such a kind baby not be the best behaved? Tears instantly welled up in my eyes. If I hadn't been so poor at judging people, how could my child have suffered such grievances? The tears on her face vanished, a smile lifted the corners of her mouth, and she reached out to wipe the tears from my face. "Baby loves Mommy very much, but I have to go report now. Mommy, you have to take good care of yourself." The girl's delicate body slowly disappeared from my sight, the stinging sensation growing more intense. If I don't hold on to her now, I might never see her again. But all I grasped was a wisp of dust. "Will you come back? Mommy will take you home." All I got was silence. I collapsed to the ground, looking despairingly at the place where she had vanished, crying until I was breathless. "Luna, wake up, Luna." Daniel's gentle voice sounded in my ear, and I slowly opened my eyes. A tear slid down from the corner of my eye onto the pillow, and I realized it had all been a dream. I raised my hand and placed it on my swollen belly. The smile at the corner of my mouth disappeared at that moment, replaced by a look of panic on my face. It must have been an emergency at the time when the child was born. It must have been like that. I looked at Daniel, who was worried beside me, with a trembling voice. "Is the baby in the incubator? How is she?" Daniel's hand, which was comforting me, suddenly stopped, his eyes full of guilt. I laughed out loud and lightly patted his hand. "You still want to scare me? I can already feel the pain at the incision. Do you have any photos for me to see?" The baby, The baby was born without breathing. I stared blankly at Daniel's phoenix eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses, trying to see any abnormality in his gaze. His eyes showed nothing but guilt and bloodshot whites. I clenched the clothes on my chest tightly with both hands, trying to dispel that suffocating feeling. Don't cry. I will seek justice for you and the baby, and I will make Vincent pay. It was then that I learned from Daniel what had happened while I was unconscious. After Vincent was knocked to the ground by a punch from Daniel, he allowed the medical team he brought to come forward and treat me. He made sure they guaranteed the health of both me and the child. Yvette, seeing that the child who could soon be saved was being stopped, was filled with anger. She stepped forward and held me tightly, not allowing the medical team to treat me. She even told Vincent to call security to let them in to drive Daniel away. Vincent, if you were a bit smarter, you would let me take Luna away. Otherwise, whether the Vincent family can continue to exist is uncertain. Luna is Vincent's wife. You have nothing to do with her, so what right do you have to take her away? Daniel sneered at her, his eyes full of contempt. Then he took out his phone and called his secretary to cancel the cooperation with the Vincent family. Vincent did not expect Daniel to be willing to compensate for me. Helpless, he pulled Yvette away, wanting to think things over carefully. But this action angered Yvette, who slapped Vincent across the face and shouted angrily, "You let Luna's child live? But what about my Ethan?" Daniel, worried that the two arguing would affect my treatment, drove them out. Then the doctor informed him that my heartbeat was weak and I needed emergency rescue. The baby in my belly also lost its heartbeat due to lack of oxygen. Daniel had no choice but to prioritize saving me. The two outside the door rekindled their hope. Vincent shamelessly approached Daniel. "Daniel, since the child can no longer survive, can we perform a cesarean and immediately proceed with the transplant?" "Vincent, don't even think about it. The child could have been born healthy, but you killed it. Now you want to exploit her last bit of value." I tightly clasped my hands together, biting down on my back teeth to suppress the unwillingness in my heart. I don't understand why, though they are both his children, Yvette's is a treasure, while my child is just a sacrifice of their union. The hatred in my eyes grew stronger, and my gaze toward Daniel was full of pleading. "Daniel, I regret marrying him. Call the family lawyer to draft a divorce agreement." "Is it really that simple? Just a divorce?" Daniel looked at me with confusion, his eyes full of hurt. At a glance, I knew he thought I still loved Vincent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let them off so easily. I gave him a sidelong glance. I'm not a saint. How could I choose to forgive after being hurt? Before I could finish speaking, he cut me off, and I was helpless. Ethan is Vincent's child, or so they say. I don't have any proof yet. Daniel frowned, but immediately agreed to help me find the truth. Vincent already had a child before he got married, but he still pretended to be innocent to gain my trust. Now that my child has been ruined by them, how could I possibly let him go? When I pleaded a second time to see that tiny, unopened-eyed child, Daniel fled in panic, leaving me alone on the hospital bed, quietly grieving. The hospital room door was pushed open again, and Daniel came over to me, excited. Seeing him like this, a flicker of anxiety rose in my heart. Could it be that my child was saved? I forced myself to sit up despite the pain, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I knew Daniel wouldn't let me down. I got the news. Yvette's son is currently in critical care. It's possible he might not survive along with the child. The hope that surged in my heart was completely extinguished, and I lay back down feeling utterly desolate. My voice carried a trace of despair. No, Vincent is his father. Even if the absorption is poor, he will definitely save him. Vincent and Ethan's bone marrow do not match. Shocked, I saw that Yvette had clearly stated that Vincent and her child were a match. Now Daniel says they don't match, which might mean Yvette is hiding something from Vincent. It's even more likely that the child is not his. Seeing my doubtful look, Daniel nodded. Although I don't know the truth, I can say with certainty that if we don't find the bone marrow within a day, Ethan won't survive. The adults are at fault, but the child is innocent. Just thinking about such a young child having to endure that kind of pain fills me with a sense of compassion. Hesitating, I still voice the doubt in my heart. If my child has no hope, would donating to him help him live? Would that count as a kind of continuation? Don't blame yourself. Even if you agreed, it wouldn't save him. Daniel began emergency resuscitation as soon as the child was brought out. He compared the results with the amniocentesis report that Vincent had previously deceived me with. It was discovered that a vet had tampered with the results. I couldn't imagine what kind of heart of stone would harm a fetus. The anger in my heart surged continuously, and the hatred in my eyes threatened to consume me. If it weren't for the pain still lingering at the incision, I would have grabbed a knife and gone after those two to fight desperately. But before I could take action, Vincent appeared before me with red eyes. He no longer had his previous vigor. His entire being was a mix of despair and sorrow. I looked at him with a cold sneer, a wave of sorrow rising in my heart for my child. Luna, how can you be so heartless? Your child is about to die. Why can't you save my child? His accusations stabbed into my heart like a sharp knife. Furious, I threw the porcelain bowl in my hand at his head. Vincent dodged too late and was hit on the head. Blood flowed profusely, leaving him in a miserable state, but even so, it did nothing to ease my pain. Just when I thought he couldn't bear to leave, the next thing he said made my blood boil. Luna, you've hit and scolded me enough now. Can you let my staff come to the hospital to help with the examination? My sinister gaze made him quickly add, Don't worry, I'll pay. I snorted coldly. How shameless must he be to think that after hurting me, I would still willingly help him. If it weren't for Daniel needing some time to find evidence, I would have thrown the divorce agreement from the drawer right in his face. Besides, when we got married, the Vincent family was already on the brink of bankruptcy. For my sake, my family and the Vincent family invested in him. Otherwise, the Vincent family might not even exist now. Before the divorce, I want to take back everything that belongs to me. Those two think that just because they left me, the Vincent family will remain safe and sound. Well, I'll make sure they end up with nothing. If you have the ability, go ask for it yourself. Do you think I would still help you when I'm about to divorce you? You better take that idea back as soon as possible. Just because of a child, you want to divorce me? Luna, are you crazy? Yes, I went crazy the moment you tried to use my child to please others. I wish I could tear you apart and strip you to the bone. Vincent didn't expect me to lose my mind and quickly stepped forward to hold me in his arms. I originally wanted to push him away, but when I saw the figure outside the door, I withdrew my hand. He gently comforted me on my head, a trace of apology flashing in his eyes. I was full of sarcasm in my heart. Anyone can pretend. Once you recover, let's have another child, okay? If you don't want to help, then don't. I'll figure it out myself, but that means I'll spend a little less time with you. Yvette's angry face outside the door made me quite pleased. There was going to be a good show. I quickly pulled away from his embrace, a smile curling at the corner of my mouth. Vincent thought I had forgiven him and lowered his head to plant a kiss on my lips. Watching him get closer and closer to me, I held back my nausea and stayed still. The next moment, a crisp slap sounded, and I felt even happier inside. Vincent, Ethan is still being resuscitated. Instead of thinking about how to save the child, here you are, cozying up and acting like a submissive. He seemed not to expect Yvette to suddenly appear, and his eyes were full of panic as he looked at her. He glanced back and forth between me and Yvette, cursed under his breath, and then pulled Yvette into his arms. It's not what you saw. I just wanted to buy her off to find a donor for Ethan. You know how much I love you. How could I like another woman? The two were lost in their mutual confessions, completely unaware of the phone under the blanket. Having gathered enough evidence, I directly kicked them out. Yvette looked at me with a mocking expression, her eyes full of pride. See? In Vincent's heart, I'm still the most important. Without you, we will definitely be very happy. Is that so? Then I wish you both a long and happy life." Yvette angrily stomped her foot and turned to leave. I picked up my phone, and the comments in the live stream had already exploded. I never expected Yvette to have a child out of wedlock and to be her own brother's mistress. This really shatters all my values. I saw the two of them enter a hotel room before, and I thought they had a good sibling relationship, but I never imagined it was this kind of relationship. I used to think she was some pure fairy, but behind the scenes, she plays so dirty and acts so arrogantly in front of the legitimate wife. Looking at these, a cold smile curled at the corner of my mouth. Before Vincent came in, I had already received a call from Daniel. I then placed the phone under the blanket with the camera exposed, initially nervous about whether I might mess things up. The moment I saw Yvette, a weight lifted from my heart. But within just an hour, the Vincent family group's stock had already dropped. Even the PR team stepped in to announce that Yvette and Vincent are not biological siblings, but adopted. The Vincent family kept this matter tightly under wraps. I was unaware of it before the wedding. Until 6 months ago, when Ethan was hospitalized and Vincent was on a business trip abroad, Yvette had no choice but to organize a family-wide genetic matching. Except for the child in my womb, no one else was a match. It was only then that I learned Yvette was picked up by Vincent at the amusement park. Previously, the two used this kind of relationship as a cover, but now this relationship would be the beginning of my revenge. Just as I opened my eyes, Daniel came in carrying breakfast. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Ethan is not Vincent's son. The two have no blood relation." I had considered such an outcome, but I never expected Yvette to be so bold. She could repeatedly use Vincent, even going so far as to tamper with the child in my womb. I couldn't help but think that Ethan's biological father might be a senior executive at the Vincent Family Hospital. Seeing the doubt in my eyes, Daniel placed the documents from the bag into my hands. I carefully examined the changes she had undergone in the 20 years since entering the Vincent family. Finally, my gaze froze on Yvette's 21st birthday. That day, all the household servants were given a day off by Vincent, but he stayed home to surprise Yvette. The two drank a little at home, and Vincent lost control and forced himself on Yvette. At that time, Yvette already had a boyfriend, who is now the hospital director. Seeing the relationships among them, I instantly understood that Yvette was seeking revenge. Looking further back, Yvette and the director had been secretly dating ever since. Until 5 years ago, the time they spent together decreased, while Yvette spent more time with Vincent. It was around then that Yvette found out she was pregnant. I placed the documents in my hand on the bed and picked up my phone to check the progress of my family acquiring Vincent family's shares. Do you think Vincent would collapse if I gave him these documents? Not yet. I want him to see it with his own eyes and then regret it deeply. I rejected Daniel's suggestion and revealed the plan in my heart. After he nodded, he went out to make a call. At that moment, Yvette, her hair disheveled, ran into my hospital room. Holding a knife, she tried to stab me. "Luna, you killed my son. You deserve to die." The wound from the blade hadn't healed, making it difficult for me to get up, so I could only painfully shift my body to the side. Just as the tip of the knife grazed my face, Daniel kicked Yvette aside. It was then that I learned Ethan had died this morning due to unsuccessful resuscitation. I never expected her and the director to be so ruthless. To avoid exposing their affair, they would rather let the child die than reveal any clue. But even so, how could she place the blame on me? "Daniel, call the police. Even if she can't be imprisoned, she must at least endure some hardship." Just as Daniel took out his phone, Vincent arrived at the ward. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked utterly worn down. A pang of pain stirred in my heart. When my child was gone, his face showed nothing but disdain. Now he shows this heartbroken look just to disgust me? But the next second, he shouted at me angrily. "Luna, if it weren't for your live stream yesterday, Yvette and I wouldn't have dared to show up at the hospital, and I wouldn't have been so busy trying to save the company that I forgot to hire a nanny for Ethan." It's all your fault. I clapped my hands, my hearty laughter echoing throughout the room. I've seen shameless people before, but never anyone this shameless. They can even call black white. Vincent, this is what they call divine punishment that can be forgiven, but self-inflicted sins that cannot be survived. Your retribution doesn't end here. Yvette wanted to rush at me to hit me, but she fainted from emotional agitation. After they left, the room fell into silence. I asked Daniel to give the divorce agreement to Vincent, stating that I wanted half of the family assets or else the ugly photos of the two of them would be spread around. Vincent called me several times, but I hung up on him each time, eventually blocking him. After he was discharged from the hospital, he came to my house wanting to see me once, but I refused every time. He only wanted me to show mercy and let the Vincent family go, then help him with funding. My gloomy expression made Daniel, who rarely smiled, show a mocking look on his face. Am I really such a fool, letting him use me over and over again? You are just too sincere with people, always giving off the illusion that you would forgive even if they did something wrong. Daniel's words successfully pleased me, otherwise, how could he be the one who understands me best? Without his help during this time, how could I have successfully made Vincent feel afraid? Just yesterday, I heard from the villa over there that Yvette and Vincent had a huge fight at home. The once passionate love between them has crumbled under the drive of interests. Upon hearing this news, I called Daniel and told him we could take action. That's why he showed up at my house today, just to watch a good show later. Daniel glanced at his wrist to check the time, then directly took my hand and headed outside. We happened to see Vincent sitting in the car, his eyes looking over at us. His gaze finally landed on our hands, and a flash of anger crossed his face. Luna, we just got divorced, and you're already moving on seamlessly. I even doubt whether that child is mine. If a dog's mouth can't spit out ivory, I advise you to just keep quiet. Thinking about what was about to happen, I was in a good mood and didn't want to bother with this little nobody anymore. But he grabbed my arm, rushing to get scolded, so I can't be blamed. When the Vincent family company was so glorious before, why didn't you say we had connections? What are you afraid now? After saying that, I shook him off and walked away. Looking at the car in the rearview mirror, Daniel and I exchanged a smile. I had deliberately provoked him just now to make him catch up with us. Otherwise, the show would be missing its male lead. But we had wasted so much time earlier, and I wasn't sure if we could create a chance encounter. Daniel seemed to notice my hesitation and gently patted my head to comfort me. Don't worry, I've arranged people. You definitely won't have to see them clawing at each other. His voice was gentle and refined, like a warm current that soothed the unease in my heart. As soon as I arrived at the hotel, I saw Yvette wearing a white bodycon dress, her face covered with a mask. Standing beside her was a man in a suit, wearing sunglasses. Seeing their outfits, I laughed out loud. Was this an attempt to deceive oneself? Anyone familiar would recognize them at a glance. Sure enough, after they left the bar, Vincent came in. The hand that was about to stop me stiffened in place, eyes full of doubt. Just as they turned to go upstairs, Vincent clearly saw half of Yvette's face. His face turned pale, and his voice was filled with suspicion. Who is that man? What are they doing at the hotel? Without waiting for our response, he hurriedly chased after Yvette. Vincent had been standing in the hallway for half an hour, his hand poised to knock on the door. Until ambiguous voices sounded from inside, Vincent could no longer bear it and forcefully slammed the door open. Seeing Vincent choking, I gave Daniel a thumbs up. Although Vincent's face showed doubt about the door's quality, his steps were already heading into the room. The two entwined on the bed completely ignited Vincent's anger. Yvette, you are truly shameless, daring to fool around behind my back. Yvette showed no panic on her face. Instead, she calmly put on her clothes, her eyes full of disdain. I'm being affectionate with my own man. What business is that of yours? You are my sister, but also my woman. How can you be with someone else? Yvette laughed out loud, tears falling along with her sobs. "You know I'm your sister, yet you and your father are beasts. You said you adopted me to give me a home, but in reality, you wanted to raise a pet for your own pleasure." Her sorrowful voice made my heart falter. To be honest, both of them were quite handsome and were the kind of people we girls would tease about in private. I just never expected them to be like this. Yvette had just turned 18 and planned to repay them after starting college, but unexpectedly, Vincent's father lured her into bed. She had finally found a boy she liked, thinking she could escape their clutches. But that night, Vincent drugged her and had relations with her. This act plunged her into a deep abyss. She thought only death could cleanse her, but then she discovered she was pregnant. Overwhelmed by depression, this stark contrast aroused the director's suspicion. Upon learning the truth, he did not blame her. Instead, he held her close, soothing her gently and vowed to seek revenge on her behalf. Yvette looked at her boyfriend approaching her like this, and the thought of dying in her heart was put aside. She planned to give birth to the child, then marry Vincent, and ultimately take control of the Vincent family. After the child was born, it was discovered that the child had a congenital blood disease caused by the medicine taken earlier. Yvette was extremely scared at the time, worried that Vincent would find out the truth and ruin her plan. But at that moment, her boyfriend had already become the office director of the Vincent Family Hospital. The two of them conspired together to deceive Lord Vincent that Ethan's body could not accept the bone marrow, so they had to use that of his biological brother. Vincent understood that he had already caused Yvette harm at that time, and if they had another child, it would make Yvette hate him to death. So he decided to marry, letting the other child become a sacrifice. "No, I truly like you. How can you use me like this? You forced me, made me betray him, and caused my child to suffer from a young age. I swear I will make sure you have no descendants." Yvette looked at Vincent with a cold sneer, the deep hatred in her eyes impossible to dissolve. "As a woman, I feel sorry for her, but that is no reason for her to harm my child." Just thinking about that child, who was gone before I even met her, I could no longer hold back my anger and slapped her across the face. "On what grounds do Yvette and he fabricate evidence to hurt my child?" A trace of guilt flashed in Yvette's eyes as she looked at me, but the next second it vanished. "Luna, that was your stupidity. I warned you countless times that it would be good if there was a child who could donate to Ethan, but you didn't understand and insisted on getting pregnant. To take revenge on Vincent, I had no choice but to make him destroy his own child with his own hands." Yvette succeeded. She took revenge on the Vincent family. Seeing this scene and hearing those words, Vincent lunged at Yvette. "Bitch, I like you so much. How dare you hurt me like this?" Just as his hand was about to fall on Yvette's face, the police outside came in. In the past few days, Daniel had hired hackers to retrieve the deleted video from the hospital that day. This morning, he handed it along with all the medical records I had checked at the hospital to the police. They were charging Vincent and the other two with attempted murder. Vincent looked confused as the police came in. When the police showed the arrest warrant, panic spread across Vincent's face. "Officer, I am the president of our family group. It's impossible for me to break the law." In the end, the few of us were taken back to the police station. Vincent, knowing it was me who reported them, walked straight up to me. "Luna, it was all my fault before. Please forgive me, considering I was also deceived. We will have children in the future. I will work hard to make it up to you, okay?" Vincent was like a piece of stubborn gum stuck to me, making me feel utterly disgusted. Just as I was about to warn him to stay away from me, Yvette burst out laughing, looking at him with utter contempt. "You still dare to think about having children? Vincent, I'm telling you, don't dream about it. It will never happen in this lifetime." It was only then that we learned Ethan had been diagnosed by doctors with multiple diseases at birth and was unlikely to live past 5 years old. Yvette looked at the tiny child, her hatred growing deeper. With the help of the hospital director, she began administering a slow-acting poison to Vincent, making his life unbearable. As for my child, it was quite fortunate that I was able to conceive, but after I got pregnant, Yvette took leave every day. It's almost impossible for Vincent to have a child now. Upon hearing this explanation, Vincent collapsed to the ground, roaring in a hoarse voice. "Yvette, you bitch, go to hell." Seeing him heartbroken like that, I felt quite pleased and hurried to tell him about the company's situation. "Vincent, don't get too upset. It's her fault that you can't have children, but your company's stock hit the daily limit down just half an hour ago." Vincent no longer showed the earlier agitation. Instead, he looked at me calmly, his eyes full of regret. "Luna, I was wrong. You said if our child were still with us, wouldn't we be a happy family now?" I did not answer his question, instead showing him the chaotic state of his company. He had been seeking investment all this time, but Daniel had arranged for all the partners to withhold any resources from him. The bankruptcy of the Vincent family was only a matter of days away. Vincent seemed to have lost his spiritual support, calmly recounting our past. Each time he mentioned something, I erased it from my mind, until there was no trace of him left in all my memories. Until the police came out with the director, he closed his eyes in despair. "Luna, if I told you I fell in love with you, would you wait for me when I get out?" "No, I would rather you die." Then I turned and walked away, saying a final goodbye to my past life. Vincent was sentenced for attempted murder and rape. Yvette and the director were also duly punished for falsifying medical records and attempting to take a life. After we got home, Daniel looked at me with little interest and directly pulled me into his arms. "The reason I won't let you see the child is because all the blood vessels in her body are bulging, and I'm afraid you won't be able to handle it." "What do you mean?" Hearing this, I suddenly broke free from his embrace, my eyes full of shock. It was then that I learned the medicine Yvette gave Vincent was harmful to the fetus. When born, the child would be no different from a normal person, but once injured, the blood vessels would bulge, eventually leading to death. Suddenly, I realized that perhaps leaving like this was also a kind of relief for her. Otherwise, watching her slowly wither away during treatment over the next few decades would be a true torment for her. And now they have all received the punishment they deserve, which can be seen as avenging her. Thinking of this, my heart instantly felt at ease. Seeing the heaviness leave my face, Daniel pulled me into his arms again. "If you still want to see her, then I'll accompany you to welcome her home once more, okay?" Listening to Daniel's words, a bright smile appeared on my face. I never would have thought that the dignified president of the Daniel family could have such a side when it comes to courting. After agreeing, we began living a shameless life, except the difference was that every day I would receive calls from the police station. Vincent wanted to see me, but I refused every time. Such actions angered Daniel, and after he personally went to the prison, my life finally returned to peace.